Hey there, my wedding planning friends, and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, thanks so much for clicking on my video. I'm Emily Summer. I'm a wedding planner based in Montana, and I make weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice. I'm also the owner of Velvet Bride, which is a wedding dress store here in Missoula, Montana, which is where we are filming today, as we are going to talk all about wedding veils. We're going to talk about the different kinds of wedding veils and also some tips on how to choose the right one for your wedding dress. First, I'll go through each type of veil and kind of explain the verbiage that you might have seen or heard and not know what that means in relation to wedding veils. So we'll start from the shortest and go to the longest. So shortest is a birdcage veil, and I don't have one in my store to show you in person, but typically a birdcage veil is just very short on the head. It covers typically most of the front of the face, or kind of like a swooping of the side of the face, and coming just below the jawline is how long the veil typically is, and that is the shortest veil. Next, you would have what is known as a shoulder length veil, which is typically just brushing the shoulders. Very short, but not as short as a birdcage veil. Those first two aren't very popular here for my brides in Montana, so I don't have anything to show you, but moving into the next shortest would be an elbow length veil, which, as it suggests, reaches just below the elbows. So as you can see, it's just around my elbow length, and this will obviously vary depending on the bride. So these are very general statements in terms of the length of a veil. And it also will change slightly depending on where your hair is and how your hair is done. So if you have a veil up higher on your head, then it's obviously going to be a little bit shorter than if you have it lower on your head, like in a low bun or something like that. Next, we would have what's referred to as a fingertip length veil, which, as the name suggests yet again, reaches just about the fingertips. So you can see right here, it's right around my fingertips. It's pretty much just below the booty there. And in the front can be worn kind of over the shoulders a little bit, or off your shoulders totally in the back. Either way, this is what is referred to as a fingertip veil. Now, this veil is tapered, and so I'm showing this for the length of a knee-length veil, as I don't have a real solid knee-length veil here in the store. So this one, you can see that it's double layered, but the longest layer, I'll step back so you can see, is a little bit longer, closer to hitting the backs of my knees. So this is what's called a knee-length veil, and I'm referring to this first section right here. That comes down to my knees. Now, this veil also has the second layer, which, if you've heard the term blusher, that is what this top layer is referred to, and that is the layer that goes over in front of your face. Now, this isn't super common anymore. We aren't seeing that a ton, but if you are looking for a veil that you can wear over your face, you want to be looking for one that has two layers, as if you're just having the one layer of a veil, it's really difficult to be able to flip it over your head back afterwards, and also before if you just have the one layer because of how it's placed on the comb. So if you want to have a blusher and something in front of your face, you are likely going to be looking at something that has two layers like this one does. Next, we will move into a floor length veil. These are all pretty self-explanatory based on their names. So as you can imagine, the floor length veil goes just to the floor. So I'm not sure, I'll step back as far as I can here. You can see, hopefully, that this one is just barely touching the floor. Move this chair out of the way. So rather than dragging on the floor, it's just barely touching the floor in a floor length veil. And I like this particular one because it is more rounded, so it's not as long in the front, so it does kind of just drape and frame the body really nicely. And so it does kind of give the illusion of a fingertip length veil in the front, but then you do have that long length in the back. And finally, we have a cathedral length veil. Now, there is a veil called a chapel length that is sometimes referred to in between these two. I don't personally carry one in my store. I feel like most brides either want the floor length veil, or if they're going to go longer, they're just going to go all the way through to a cathedral length veil. But a chapel length is basically right in between those two, so it just kind of pools on the floor a little bit longer than a floor length, but not as long as the cathedral veil. So cathedral length veil, as we've kind of described, is much longer than a floor length veil, and it's kind of meant to extend past a dress's train. So I'm trying to flip this out and I'll walk away. So as you can see, hopefully, it does drag on the ground quite a bit further past where a dress train would end. So this is a great option if you have a long train, but maybe it doesn't have a whole lot of embellishment on it, or if you don't have much of a train on your dress and you really want to achieve the look of a train. A cathedral length veil is a great way to accomplish that. So now let's talk about how to choose the right veil for your wedding dress. So there really aren't any like hard and fast rules when it comes to picking out a veil for your dress, other than if you have lace on your dress, you want to be matching the lace as close as possible if you are planning to have lace in your veil. And you want to take the color, fabric, and shape of your dress into consideration when choosing a veil as well. So here we have an A-line satin ball gown, which is essentially a blank slate when it comes to having a veil. And so what I mean by that is there's not really any definition in the skirt that is going to serve as a contrast to the veil, or that is going to be distracting, that you're going to be affecting the overall integrity or shape of the dress. In addition, there is no lace, no embellishment, or nothing on the skirt that's going to be trying to match or be worried about clashing with your veil. So you can do kind of whatever you want with this. And what a lot of brides will choose, as I kind of mentioned earlier, when you do have a more simple skirt, a lot of brides will choose to add in some embellishment via the veil in this situation. So, for example, we're going to put on a cathedral veil that has some lace on the bottom. And obviously there is no head on this mannequin, so I'm not going to actually be able to put it on, so we'll give it the best kind of visual possible here. So this particular cathedral length veil, it's very simple tulle all the way up with just some lace detailing on the bottom. So what this is going to do is just extend past the train and just give it a little bit of embellishment on the train to kind of tie in some lace, and it does extend that train just a little bit as well. So you can see how that detail on the veil just extends past the skirt and just adds a little bit of something extra while still not taking away from the rest of the dress. It's just a simple tulle cathedral veil. With this being a satin gown as well, a lot of times I suggest having a veil that kind of ties in that satin element too, especially if you're wanting to keep with the more simple classic style. So this veil, I'm not sure how well you can tell in the video, but it is lined with a satin edge lining here, and this one can come in whatever length that we want it to come in. And this is also a great option to just kind of tie in that fabric of the dress if there's any sort of satin elements on your gown and you want a more simple look, rather than having lace on the bottom or on the veil in general, is to just have some kind of polished finished lining, and then you still maintain a very simple veil. It's not taken away from your dress, but it does give a more finished polished look rather than just having a plain tulle veil. Now, when you have a gown like this that has a little bit more intricacy, a little bit more detail, this one does have 3D floral lace, so it does pop off, as well as the embroidered lace as well, and some sequins and pearls. So you've got a lot kind of going on in this dress, and so you want to make sure that the veil that you're choosing is tying in those elements without being distracting or overpowering or taking away from your detail on your dress. So for a dress like this, we can do what I was just talking about with that satin cathedral veil. Very simple, just polished look, and probably cathedral so that it extends past the train here or just meets the train. Or for those brides that do want a little something extra and they do want some detail, finding something that closely matches the detail on your dress is key in tying your whole look together. So this particular veil is cathedral length, so it will extend past the train, which you probably can't see in the video right now. However, the floral detail on the veil does match the floral detail in the dress. So if you are a bride that does want detail on your veil, even though you also have a lot of detail in your dress, just make sure that you're doing so in a way that complements the detail on your dress. As you can see here, the florals on the veil match the floral detail in the gown, tying it all together. Now, when it comes to choosing length, that really does come down to, number one, personal preference. If you are somebody that wants a really long train, then you're going to be deciding between like a floor length chapel or cathedral veil. If that just seems too cumbersome for you, you just don't even want a long train, you're not wanting a long veil, then that's when you're going to be deciding between those shorter options, like a knee length, a fingertip, or even shorter. So there are a few things to keep in mind when determining the specific length if you are going to go shorter or long. Like I mentioned already, for on the longer side, if you do have a fairly long train, you want to make sure that your veil isn't going to cut off that train. So if you have a train with a lot of detail, you're going to want to go for something that's either going to match the train or go a little bit longer. You probably don't want a floor length veil if it's a veil that has any sort of finished edge or detailing on the bottom, as it will likely cut off the bottom of the dress or distract from the train detail. So that's just kind of a good rule of thumb when it comes to deciding on the length if you are going on the longer side. If you're going shorter, the shape of the back and how open it is might play a big role in determining the length of your veil. So for example, obviously this one doesn't fit the mannequin, so it's even longer than normal, but this is a very low and open back. So with this one, you either want to go kind of really short or longer, more fingertip or knee length. Otherwise, doing a shoulder length or an elbow veil will probably cut this off in a weird spot. It's going to take away from the really flattering part that the having an open back does for your body. So if I were to hold this up here, You can see how when a veil just hits just below where the open back is, it's a lot more flattering and elongating. It doesn't detract from the overall shape that this dress is giving than if you were to have something that comes up right here and just kind of cuts off where that open back is. And it's, again, just not going to look as flattering as having something either just below it or a short one up here at the shoulders if you are wanting a short veil. So similarly, there are a couple things to keep in mind if you are going on the longer side of things when it comes to the overall shape of your dress, to make sure that you are not cutting off the dress or creating any distracting or unflattering lines with your dress or your body. So for example, with this gown, which I'll show you a closer look here in a second, there's a lot of, well, first of all, there's a lot of beading and detailing up on the bodice and throughout the rest of the skirt, and then it comes into these flared tulle pieces. And so because of where it comes together fitted, so this is something to keep in mind, if you do have a trumpet or a mermaid style dress that does come in and have very obvious lines below the hips and just above the knees, you want to make sure that your veil is not going to cut that off or create any other weird lines, or else that will kind of chop your body into different parts that is not going to be that long, elongating, flattering look. So keep that in mind if you do have a trumpet, a mermaid, or a more fitted gown that does have very obvious lines like this. In that case, then you likely want to have either a shorter veil that's going to come up before those lines happen, or you want to go longer, either floor length or cathedral veil. With this particular dress, I always recommend either having a plain tulle if you're going to go shorter, or to just go all the way long cathedral so that you have an extended train, so that it's a very obvious separation between the veil and the dress. Or again, to go really short. So I'll show you what I mean by a tulle veil that's going to blend into the dress. So I'll get it in position here. So this is just a plain tulle veil, unlike the satin edge cathedral veil that I showed you before that has a polished edge. This one is just raw tulle, so it just blends in. So it's great for tulle dresses or a tulle skirt, so it just kind of blends in and you still get the look of a veil, but doesn't take away from that soft, flowy tulleness. So you can see here as we go down, you can barely tell where the veil ends and where that skirt and train begins. It just blends pretty seamlessly into the skirt, into the tulle on the skirt, so that it's not detracting from all the detail down there, and it's not taking away from those lines where it begins to flare out just below the thighs. So like I said, there aren't really any specific rules necessarily when it comes to choosing a veil that will go with your wedding dress. However, there are some things to consider when it comes to choosing the right veil for your dress to give the best polished look you can. A couple more things I want to mention is to pay attention to the color of your dress. So make sure that when you are purchasing your wedding dress, you ask wherever you purchased it from, the bridal boutique, what color, specific color your dress is. Is it a white? Is it an ivory? Is it an off-white? Because you want to make sure that you are getting a veil that's going to match that color. So at first glance, everything kind of just seems white, but when you put things next to each other, you can really see the difference between if you were to have a bright white wedding dress and you have an off-white or an ivory veil. When they are next to each other, you will really be able to tell the difference. So you want to make sure that they are going to match very nicely when it comes to ordering your veil to match your wedding dress. But a general rule of thumb is you want to make sure that your veil is complementing your wedding dress and not competing with it. So if there's a lot of detailing on your dress, a very good, easy option just to go with something a little bit more on the simple side. And if you have a more simple dress, you are free to dress it up and embellish your veil a little bit more to kind of add on to that look. If you plan to wear a veil on your wedding day, I'd love to hear what style is your favorite. If you've already chosen one out, I would love to hear what you have picked to go with your wedding dress. And hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe to get weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice, and we'll see you next week.